Well, hello and welcome back to the Unseen Winter. Do you hear what I hear in the quiet of winter? Tonight, Chapter 3, The Stranger Who Remembered Everyone.
Cloudmere was one of those towns winter seemed to favor a little too much. Snow there didn't just fall and melt, it lingered. It tucked itself into the corners of the old buildings and clung to tree roots like it was afraid of being forgotten. Even when the rest of the valley began to thaw, Cloudmere held onto patches of gray ice and thin crusts of frost, as if time was reluctant to move forward. The locals joked about it. They said winter had a soft spot for Cloudmere. The truth was closer to the opposite. The season wouldn't let go of the town, and the town wasn't very good at letting go of anything either.
On a Thursday evening that felt like it had happened before, in that vague deja vu way people ignore to keep from feeling unsettled, a bus pulled into the small station at the edge of town. The driver stepped down, stretched his back, and opened the doors with a hiss of tired hydraulics. Only one passenger got off. No coat despite the cold, no suitcase. Just a worn satchel and a quiet, collected way of moving, like every step had been rehearsed until it didn't need thinking about anymore. He paused on the curb, inhaled the icy air, and looked around Cloudmere with the expression of someone checking to see if a familiar dream had stayed the same.
The town looked back at him. A woman locking up her florist shop, a teenager brushing snow from a bike rack, and an older couple walking a dog that didn't want to be out in the cold. They all noticed him, but not in the same way. Some felt a prickle of recognition and just simply dismissed it. Some felt nothing at all and went on with their evening. One person, though, felt her stomach drop. Her name was Rowan Wynn, Cloudmere's only proper journalist, even if the town's idea of news was mostly lost mittens and bake sale reminders. She'd carved out a small office overlooking Main Street with a desk that wobbled and a heater that worked when it felt like it. From behind that window, Rowan watched the stranger step onto the sidewalk. And for just a heartbeat, she had that strange sensation that she was late to a meeting she didn't remember scheduling.
The man began to walk. He didn't wander or hesitate. His gaze moved from face to face with the efficiency of someone reading a list. He passed Mrs. Dalton, who was struggling with a grocery bag and failing to hide just how winded she felt. He slowed, offered a gentle nod. "Mrs. Dalton, the tulips came back this year. You were afraid they wouldn't, but they did."
She stopped as if someone had pulled a string. The mention of tulips hit harder than it should have. Those bulbs had belonged to her late husband. She talked to the flowers when she thought no one was listening, apologizing to him when they didn't sprout on time. She had never told anyone about that. The stranger continued on.
He passed Gerald Pike closing up the hardware store, wrestling the gate down over the windows. "Gerald, don't sell the old truck tomorrow. You'll get it started in the morning. Check the battery connections first."
Gerald froze, one hand still on the lock. The decision to sell that truck had been a private surrender he'd made the night before, alone at his kitchen table. He hadn't even told his wife yet. The stranger moved on, turning toward the crosswalk where Mae Foster stood waiting, scarf wrapped high over her mouth against the wind. He watched her for a moment, not with curiosity, but with a sudden kind of sorrowful affection.
"May, your son forgave you a long time ago."
She sucked in a breath so sharp that she nearly choked on it. Her eyes filled even before she could stop them. No one knew the whole story of the fight that had driven her boy away. Not really. They knew the outline, the shouting match, the slammed door, the fact that he never came back before the accident. They didn't know about the voicemail she replayed every year on his birthday, or the apology that she whispered into an empty kitchen, hoping it might somehow travel further than sound. The man who had never set foot in Cloudmere, as far as anyone remembered, had just reached into the center of her guilt and named it. May stepped back from him, not because she thought he meant harm, but because it was just too much.
Up in her office, Rowan's pen slid out of her hand and rolled onto the desk. She watched the scene play out below with a sharpened focus of someone whose entire job was to notice patterns. And there was a big one here. A really big one. He knew names, he knew details, he knew exactly where to press on people's lives to make them flinch. She grabbed her coat, her notebook, and the nearest pen that still worked.
Okay, mystery man, let's see what kind of story you think you're in.
She intercepted him as he reached the corner outside the diner, the warmth and yellow light spilling out onto the snow. He turned his head before she spoke, as though he'd been expecting her to arrive at exactly that second.
You've been in town for 5 minutes, and you've already upset 3 people and confused everyone else. That's impressive. Who are you?
My name is Ash.
Last name?
Just Ash.
Okay, just Ash. Let me ask the part I actually care about. How do you know these people? Because I live here, they don't forget faces, and I would remember yours.
You don't remember mine. That's different.
Her pen hovered over the blank page. So you're saying we've met?
Many times.
Right. And I suppose you're going to tell me you're psychic, or an angel, or my long-lost imaginary friend.
I'm going to tell you that this isn't the first time I've watched you walk out of that door to confront me. You say almost the same words every time. You write them down, you never get to publish them.
Her hand tightened around the notebook. She didn't like the way that sentence felt. Like something sliding into place in a puzzle she didn't remember starting.
She closed the notebook with a snap.
Okay. I'm going to file you under delusional but polite and get back to work.
She turned and left him there under the streetlight, his breath fogging in the cold air, his expression unchanged. Ash didn't chase her, because he didn't need to. The loop always brought her back.
That night, Roland fell into sleep like she always did, too late, too tired, surrounded by unfinished notes. The kind of sleep that usually came with jumbled images and half-remembered deadlines. But this time, the dream dropped her into a memory she didn't recognize as her own. She stood in a classroom that smelled of chalk and old books. The blackboard was filled with handwriting. Hers. The loops and angles were exactly the way she wrote her name on legal documents. But the words formed a date that had never happened. At least not in any year she could recall. Children's voices echoed down the hallway outside. Laughter and a squeak of sneakers, and then the bell rang in a tone she felt in her bones, though she'd never taught a single day of school in her life. She turned toward the window and saw snow falling in heavy, familiar sheets. Something tugged at her sleeve.
And there was a young boy, bright and trusting. "Come on, Mom, we'll be late."
Rowan looked down and saw him. A boy of maybe 8, cheeks pink from the cold, hat askew, eyes full of complete, unquestioning trust. Trust in her. Her throat closed. I don't understand. The scene flickered. The classroom dissolved. For a moment, she saw only rushing water, dark, swollen by snowmelt, snarling past the banks of a river. Something small just slipped from her grasp into the torrent, a flash of color vanishing beneath the surface. And she heard herself scream. Rowan woke up gasping, hand clamped over her mouth as if she could hold the sound in before it escaped. Her pillow was damp, and her heart hammered against her ribs. She had never had a son. She was certain of that. Wasn't she?
Morning brought no clarity. The town looked unchanged. Snow-plastered roofs, icicles hanging from gutters, breath puffing white in the air. Inside, Rowan felt like she was walking through a house where all the furniture had been moved just an inch to the left. Nothing looked wrong, but nothing felt right. And the stranger's words from last night kept looping through her head. This isn't the first time I've watched you walk out that door. By noon, annoyance outweighed her. She found him exactly where she suspected he'd be. Sitting at the counter in the diner, hands wrapped around a mug that had long ago stopped steaming, like he'd simply waited for the script to catch up.
Okay, Ash, let's try this again. What did you do to me?
Nothing to you, something for you.
I dreamed about a classroom I've never taught in and a child that I have never had. And I woke up feeling like I'd lost someone that I don't even remember existing. That is not nothing.
You didn't dream. You remembered.
The way he said it made the diner feel smaller. She glanced around. No one was paying attention to them. The same people sat in their usual places, and the same small talk drifted around the room, like nothing out of the ordinary was happening, like nothing ever changed. He followed her gaze.
How many times have you written about the sudden snow squall on a Thursday?
A lot. We live in Cloudmere. The weather is dramatic. That's just what it does.
And how many times have you used the phrase, like the town had seen this exact day before, in your notes, then scratched it out before printing?
She opened her mouth and then closed it again. He shouldn't know that. She didn't show anyone her drafts. She barely reread them herself once they were printed.
The same day has repeated for years, Rowan. Every time it resets, people forget details, choices, conversations, whole lives. Time folds neatly around the pane so no one has to look at it.
That's not how time works. You can't just loop one day over and over like a broken record. People would notice.
They do, a little. They call it déjà vu. They shrug it off. They learn to live with that feeling that they've already stood in a doorway, already heard that joke, already watched one specific snowstorm roll in. You're the only one who's kept notes.
She wanted to walk away again. She wanted to dismiss him outright. But under the table, her hand was shaking because part of her knew he was right. There were habits she couldn't explain, places that made her chest ache for no reason, words she hated hearing because they sounded like something she'd already said in a moment that just simply wouldn't let go. She sat down on the stool beside him. Why me?
You created the loop.
I did what?
You didn't mean to. You were grieving. You wanted one day back so badly that when the world refused, your heart found a way to bend time around the wound. It's a kind of strength, Rowan, but strength misdirected can trap more than it protects.
Images from the dream, the classroom, the river, that small hand, flared behind her eyes, and she swallowed hard. I don't have a child.
You don't remember him. The loop takes the sharpest pieces first. It makes the edges round, easier to touch, easier to ignore. But some part of you keeps writing about Thursdays and storms and days that feel like repeats. He turned toward her fully for the first time, his eyes deep with a fatigue that wasn't just physical. Every cycle, you get a little closer to seeing the truth. Every cycle, you find me just a little sooner. This time, you tracked me down on the first night, and that's why I'm here, because you're almost ready to stop running in these circles. By late afternoon, the sky had that strange overcast brightness that comes before a heavy storm. The air tasted like metal and old snow. Rowan followed Ash through Cloudmere, notebook forgotten at her side, her reporter's instincts fighting with a deeper instinct she didn't have a name for. He walked without needing directions, turning down streets as if the town were a book he'd read 100 times and could quote from memory. They stopped at a small park just behind the elementary school. The swing set groaned under a crust of ice. A single, weather-faded glove lay half buried in the snow near the slide. That's when Rowan's stomach twisted.
I've been here before.
Many times.
Her hand reached for one of the swing chains before she realized she was doing it. The metal was freezing, but the familiarity was worse. She let go as if it burned. They moved on.
Behind the maintenance shed, they stopped at a door with a rusted padlock. Ash didn't pull out a key. He just turned and looked at her. Try it.
Rowan almost rolled her eyes, but curiosity and dread had woven themselves together so tightly inside her that she couldn't separate them. Her fingers curled around the lock. She didn't think of numbers, but they came anyway. Sequence, a rhythm. She spun the dial. Right, left, right. The lock clicked open. Her breath left her in a stunned cloud in the cold air. How did I know that?
Because you've opened it in every loop.
Inside, the shed smelled of gasoline, damp wood, and old paper. On a shelf in the corner sat a box that she recognized without knowing why. Cardboard softened by time, a strip of tape dulled to a cloudy yellow. Her hands shook as she pulled it down and opened it. Inside were photographs. Not many, but enough. A boy with hair that refused to lie flat, and a woman with ink smudged on her fingers, trying to tame that hair with one hand while holding a notebook in the other. Her notebook. Her face. Her son's face. And the world swam.
At the bottom of the box was a single page from a journal. Edges rough, lines written in a frantic, slanted hand. It was her handwriting.
Don't run this time. As if responding to the words, the storm arrived. Cloudmere storms were never theatrical in the way city storms were. There were no flashing neon signs and no skyscrapers to catch the lightning. But this one carried something heavier than snow. The wind rushed down the streets like it had memorized its route, and snowflakes thickened into a curtain that erased distance. The air hummed with familiarity. Rowan knew this storm. Her body remembered it even as her conscious mind struggled.
This is where it always starts to tighten. The same storm, the same choices. The day wraps back on itself as soon as you try to reach him, Rowan.
He's in the river, isn't he?
Yes.
Then I have to go. I have to. She turned, ready to run, muscles coiled for the sprint she had made 1,000 times without knowing. Ash stepped into her path. He didn't grab her. He didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke with the weight of someone who who had watched this moment fracture reality over and over again.
You run every time. You throw yourself into the storm, into the riverbank, into the impossible chance to pull him back. And every time the loop tightens around the moment that you just can't change. Ash held her gaze. This isn't about saving him. It's about letting yourself live past the moment you lost him. The loop formed because you refused to move beyond this day. You keep asking time for a different outcome instead of asking your heart to just survive the truth.
Snow stung her cheeks and the wind clawed at her coat, urging her forward, toward the river, toward the script she'd unconsciously written and rewritten for years. Her lungs burned with unshed screams, and every instinct screamed that not running meant she was abandoning him all over again. So what do I do?
You stay. You breathe. You let the storm happen without you trying to bargain with it. You let the grief finish the sentence it's been repeating.
She shook her head once, twice, a small, wild gesture of refusal. And then she stopped. The world had narrowed to three things: Ash's steady eyes, the roar of the wind, and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She closed her eyes. She did not run. She did not chase an 8-year-old boy down to the river. And she did not throw herself at an outcome already written. She stood in the doorway of a shed, fingers digging into the splintered wood, and let herself feel the terror, the guilt, the love, all of it. She heard the echo of a scream that had already happened long ago. She heard the splash, the frantic rush of water, and the helpless shouting that followed. It all moved through her like a storm that had finally found the exit it needed. And then slowly, the noise began to fade.
The wind eased first. The snow softened from a furious blur to a gentle drift. The air warmed by a breath you could almost hear but not quite feel. Cloudmere's sky, so often gray and stubborn, broke open just enough to let a pale band of sunrise through. It was morning. For the first time in decades, it was a new day, not a repeat.
Rowan opened her eyes. The storm was gone. Her cheeks were wet. Her fingers ached from gripping the doorframe. Ash stood a few steps away now, giving her space, yet watching her with an expression that looked a lot like relief. It changed.
You changed. The world just followed. He nodded toward the town. They won't know what happened. They'll just feel lighter, like they finally got a full night's sleep after years of waking every hour without knowing why.
She thought of May, of Gerald, of Mrs. Dalton and her tulips, of a small town that had been quietly dragging the weight of one woman's frozen day without realizing it. Her grief had never been small, but now it wasn't trapped. It was simply part of her, the way love always was.
When Rowan looked toward Ash, the space he'd been standing in was empty. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. His work here was done, at least for now. But she felt something else. At the end of the street where the snow met the edge of the frozen field, a figure stood watching her. It was thin, barefoot, wrapped in an outline that seemed less like flesh, more like a memory that hadn't fully decided whether it should remain or not. He wasn't Ash. He was younger, more fragile, and somehow older at the same time. The air around him shimmered faintly as if the world wasn't entirely sure where to place him.
Rowan's heart skipped and then settled. She didn't know who he was. Not exactly. But she recognized that feeling. The sense of someone standing at the crossroads between past and something larger. He lifted his chin. An almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. Not a wave, not a warning. A simple, "I see you." Before she could speak, before she could even take a step, he blurred at the edges and slipped out of sight, like breath fading from a cold window.
Elsewhere, in a town called Briar's Crossing, a girl named Mara had watched a barefoot boy standing on unnatural ice before Winter returned to the valley. In Winter's Edge, Nina Calder had seen a similar figure at the tree line by her humming house. Now Rowan, in the freshly freed morning of Cloudmere, had seen him too. Each of them had changed something inside themselves. Each of them had shifted the balance of a season that wasn't just about temperature and snow. Winter was gathering, its scattered memories drawing them towards something that had not yet fully revealed itself.
Rowan walked back toward town with the box of photographs pressed to her chest. Not as a shield, but as an anchor. For the first time in longer than she could name, the day ahead was not a repeat. There would be new sentences, new choices, new pain, maybe, but new joy as well. She could feel her boy in the shape of that possibility. Not returned, not erased, just with her. In the way love refuses to obey the rules of time. And somewhere, woven through the quiet of the morning air, winter itself shifted, less like a season descending, and more like something waking up.
Join us tomorrow for Chapter 4 of The Unseen Winter. Do you hear what I hear in the quiet of winter?